Hello and welcome back to my new video series of Solomon Speaks, Read and Review. My name is Alan and this is my channel, Conscious Evolution. This is a video series where I'm going to be reading and reviewing my favorite book of Solomon Speaks on reconnecting your life. So if you feel drawn to the healing frequencies that I work with, or feel drawn to have a session facilitated by me, or any practitioner, really, I mean, this is great information that is very good to know for anybody, even more so for you if you're feeling called to these energies, as this is powerful information. So while I'm here, please like and share the video with like-minded people. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and click that notification bell so you get notified of all my new posts when I go live and do live meditations. Also, subscribe to the website if you want to be part of this community that I'm creating. The website is consciousevolution.love. All the links are below for all this stuff, right down in this general area right there. Also, I created a Patreon site. The link is below for that too. I poured my heart and soul into that, and consider becoming a member, because that's how I can continue putting out all this free content by all the members I have there. And I'm going to do a lot of exclusive content and just wonderful healing work that I do. Great packages for that in there too. So check it out. I love each and every one of you guys. I hope you enjoy this new video series. I'm super excited about it. This information is just super powerful and can change your life. Okay, so this is the prologue of Fred's story. This is Fred Ponslov, who him and Eric Pearl co-created this book with the channel messages from Solomon. All right, a note from Eric Pearl. You may already be familiar with me, Reconnective Healing, and the Reconnection, but you may not yet be familiar with my co-author, Frederick Ponslov, and the role he played in bringing through certain information and insights that have the capacity to transport us to a deeper and more comprehensive levels as healers and as people. While I touched upon this briefly in my own prologue, I felt it only appropriate to bring you Fred's story as well, in his own words. All right, this is Fred's words now. I seldom remember beginnings, but at some point it began in rural Wisconsin on a farm. The clearest memory was when I was 10 and I was falling asleep, or thought I was falling asleep, and heard my closet door open. I sat up in my bed and suddenly heard a whirling sound that increased in volume and pitch. And just when I thought I couldn't get any louder or any higher pitched, I felt something move into my body. I, of course, was terrified, but couldn't scream because I didn't have control of my vocal apparatus. I felt my mind racing through my body, running down into my feet and running out into my hands, trying to find some physical sensation that I still had control of. As it turned out, nothing was responding. I was literally paralyzed with fear. My breathing became shallower, and before long it seemed as if I was just panting. Then suddenly it felt as if my body was covered with a long, white, wet sheet. Slowly it started to be lifted from my feet first, but it was agonizingly slow. As soon as I got past my toes, I could feel sensations in my feet, and I wiggled my toes madly. Then, as every part of my body was slowly being reclaimed, I could feel the bodily sensations that were again mine. And when the sheet lifted past my throat, I screamed. The year was 1962, and there was no frame of reference for any of this, but it was as real for me as the proverbial heart attack. Several weeks later, on a warm August day, I awoke to the sounds of a man screaming in the distance. It felt as if it came from the yard, so I jumped out of bed as the screaming continued and raced out to the lawn alongside of our house. The screaming continued. I was standing in my underwear, but couldn't discern a clear direction from which the shrieking emanated. Our closest neighbors were each a half a mile away, and I thought that perhaps some accident had occurred on one of their farms. But then, nothing. It stopped, the screaming, and I stood dazed in wonder, my feet damp from the early morning dew. Several days later, I found out that a former hired hand from our farm had on that very morning gone to start up his new employer's tractor and wasn't aware that it was still in gear. The tractor jerked and as it started and lunged forward but was blocked by the retaining wall. And the hired hand was caught underneath the spinning rear tire. Aye. They said his screams were deafening. The tire worked its way through his body, and then the friction of the wheel on the cement started the shed on fire, and he was prematurely cremated. Ay, ugh. The only problem was that this happened 15 miles away. When the story eventually reached my ears, I knew that something was different with me, but there was no one I could confide this to, and I was unsure how to even convey what I didn't understand. I still don't understand. Around the age of 13, I remember reading about or hearing about automatic writing. Again, clueless, I would close my eyes and put a pen in my hand as I hoped that something would come through. And I could feel my hand moving across the page, yet when I opened my eyes, it was just a scrawl with no discernible words that I could grasp at the time. I saved the very first card I ever wrote, and returning to it years later, there, clearly in the middle of the scrawl, was the word energy. Sometimes you can't see something until you need to see it. I went away to college, to the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, majored in theater, and had several of what could be called psychic phenomena occur. Chalking them up to coincidence, I then moved to New York City to pursue a career as an actor, and one summer got a job at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival in Boulder. Once there, I realized that not only were we on the campus of the University of Colorado, but right next door was the Naropa Institute, a Buddhist inspired university combining contemplative studies with traditional Western disciplines. And this had become the summer of transcendental meditation. A good friend from New York coincidentally happened to be in Naropa for a summer session and told me all about it, all about TM, transcendental meditation. It's going to be called TM from here on out. I wanted to enroll, but being an actor didn't have the coinage to purchase for myself my own mantra. So I co-opted Om because I'd heard that was a mantra. As always, I had no idea what I was doing, but sat cross-legged every morning, Oming away, waiting for something to happen or my mind to settle or whatever was supposed to occur. Then one morning, after I'd given up any hope for the tangible result, something did happen. I had just been breezily pondering a question in my unquieted mind, and an answer came. But it wasn't my answer. It was something else, someone else, someone talking in a way that wasn't remotely the way I spoke. I tentatively responded to the voice, and another answer came, then another question, then another answer. I stopped for a moment and clearly thought, how great is this? Congratulations, you have just become a schizophrenic. I blamed Colorado, the elevation, the pressure from the shows, and perhaps not feeling at ease in my surroundings. And then there was a problem with writing longhand in those pre-computer days. I never had any problem prior to that, but suddenly I was challenged to form letters in a handwriting that was mine. Sometimes it would go off and spell other words. This started becoming annoying. I survived Colorado and returned to New York. Shortly afterwards, I got caught in the turbulent wake of two murders, having arrived on the scene after each had occurred. I went to two separate psychics when I still believed in psychic inevitability to make sense of what was happening. Both told me with great urgency to leave New York. It was not the city for me to be in at the moment. I had never thought of going to Los Angeles, where my former roommate had moved just 8 months earlier. She encouraged me to come out and stay with her to pursue an acting thing on the West Coast. I had never, ever contemplated living on the left coast. and still possessed the right coast snobbery about living in a state with the culturally unwashed. But after the events that had recently occurred, I thought maybe it was time to take the psychic's advice and get out of Dodge. So I packed my Rambler, which I'd routinely inherited from my wonderful aunt, and eventually made it into Route 10 and followed it to its logical conclusion. Once in LA, I immediately set about looking for a place to live, and I had no idea what area was preferable, not knowing the layout of the city. A week later, I settled into an apartment with a Murphy bed that was only one block from Grauman's Chinese Theater. Grauman's, maybe? I thought it couldn't get much more Hollywood than this. I had moved all my unpacked boxes into one corner and was about to start going through them when, while I sat on the fold out bed, the room started to move and shake. I thought it was stress from the trip westward. In actuality, it was my first earthquake. It passed almost as quickly as it started. After catching my breath, I decided to unpack a box of books, and the book on the very top, was The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. Ooh, I know Jane Roberts. I had started reading it in New York and had put a bookmark in it to continue once I was firmly or somewhat firmly rooted in La La Land. I casually opened to the bookmark page where I had left off and started reading. The chapter was about why people move to areas where earthquakes occur. After taking it in and unpacking some more boxes, I decided I would take a nap. I laid my head down, and 15 minutes later, I woke up with a start. There, at the base of my bed, was an old woman sitting with a shawl over her head and around her shoulders. My first reaction was, how did this homeless woman, one of the many who populated the streets of Hollywood in those days, get into my room with my door locked? She turned and smiled directly at me, and then she literally faded away, disappeared as I was looking at her. Welcome to Hollywood. In Jane Roberts' book, she channeled a spirit named Seth. Yes, the Seth Materials, which is also a book that I read on here. She channeled a spirit named Seth. I was dubious about a lot of it. But like anything, there were little insights here and there that I thought I could use. At one point, Seth suggested that if you wanted to have a memory of a former life, the thing to do was to make a conscious suggestion before going to sleep and having a dream about a pleasant former life, which you would then be able to remember in the morning. The first couple of nights, nada, nothing happened. Then on the third night, I had this amazingly vivid dream of being at a party at Harold Lloyd's in the late 20s. First of all, I barely knew who Harold Lloyd was. All I knew was that he was a silent film star and was the figure dangling from the hands on the clock in that iconic picture. But beyond that, not much. Anyway, in the dream, I am at this party, and it's a very big mansion. I look at Harold Lloyd, who doesn't seem to be having particularly happy time, and I turn to the person I came with, a photographer, and I say, "Why is Harold Lloyd so unhappy?" She looks at me and then says, "He has a very dark personality." And then I woke up. I thought, who in the world dreams about Harold Lloyd and his dark personality? That day I told a number of friends who were as bemused as I was, and all laughed at it. And we all laughed it off. And then several days later, early in the morning, I made my way to where my Rambler last rested, and I found only an empty space. The car was gone. Of course, I panicked and thought that someone had stolen it, and the next thought, replacing that one, was, who would steal a Rambler? Nonetheless, I called the police to report this grievous act and was informed that the car had not been stolen but towed due to the Wisconsin license plates that had expired. I, of course, was none too happy about this turn of events and had to bike my way to Beverly Hills to pay the ticket to free my Rambler from the clutches of a very proactive police department. I had never been to the Beverly Hills City Hall. As I walked down the long corridor, on either side were pictures of the huge estates that were ubiquitous in the 20s in Beverly Hills. I gave it I gazed at one picture and it stopped me cold. I thought, I knew this estate. I do. I know this estate. I looked down at the bottom of the picture to see whose it was. There, in a clear Roman font, were the words, "The Estate of Harold Lloyd." I gasped just slightly, then gasped even louder as I looked down the hall of the next picture. There was a formally posed photograph, which was Harold Lloyd at a party along with every single one of the people who were in my dream, wearing the exact same clothes that I remembered them wearing. I was totally mystified. I stared at the picture a very long time and finally moved forward, remembering the reason why I was in the hallway in the first place. But glancing back at the picture, I wondered if maybe the reason the Rambler had been towed was for me to see this. Of course, I deferred to my rational mind and reasoned that perhaps this picture was printed in a book somewhere and my subconscious mind had picked it up and spun a dream out of it. Yes, that makes sense to me. I thought as I moved up to the window to pay the fine, where my wallet got considerably lightened. Several days later, a friend called me up and told me I had to go see this psychic who lived in Simi Valley. Excuse me. She told me how remarkable he was and that without fail he guessed everyone's birthday. Well, I wasn't sure what the appeal was in having someone guess another person's birthday, but I was intrigued. I had no idea where Simi Valley was. I got on the road and drove for what seemed endless miles. It always takes longer on the journey to the unknown. I pulled up to the withered little house in need of painting, with the address barely visible above the Bougainville. Bougainvillea? I don't know what that is. I knocked on the door and there was no answer. I was a little upset, as the journey out to this hinterland was not without getting lost 2 or 3 times in these pre MapQuest years, and way before the letters GPS had any meaning to anyone. I walked around to the back of the house, and there, sitting an old Formica kitchen table with his back to me, was a still older man wearing bib overalls. He reminded me of a Santa Claus who'd come upon hard times. I asked him if he knew the guy whose name was on a piece of paper I was holding in my hand. He told me that the name was his and asked me to sit down next to him. A few roaming chickens crossed my path before I could get to the chair he pulled out for me. Now, at this point, I was really dubious about this guy because he didn't fit the profile I had in my mind for someone who was in touch with the other side, should there be a other side. He looked at me a long time and then put his head down to think. Now, my birthday happens to be April 2nd. My mother was taken to the hospital Sunday, the 1st of April, because she had gone into a semblance of labor, but they couldn't locate the doctor. And since I was going to be a cesarean, they couldn't go forward with the birth. So they waited until Monday, the 2nd, when said doctor could be located. And I was born at 8:01 that morning. So now I was sitting across from this withered old man, wondering what the point of all this was. He slowly raised his head. "This has never happened to me before," he said, "but I'm still getting two dates. I'm getting April 1st, but you were born on April 2nd. Is that correct?" I blanched and shuddered out a mystified yes. He then looked me straight in the eye, and the very next thing he uttered was, "You have a strange connection to Harold Lloyd. Has anyone ever told you that?" I was in absolute shock. I hardly heard a word of what he said after that, wondering how in the hell, of all the people who are out there, living and dead, he could come up with the name Harold Lloyd. I made my way back to Hollywood in seemingly sanity. I couldn't wrap my head around how this man knew what he knew. Now, all during this time, the voice that I had heard in Colorado would sometimes surface, and I would either ignore it or pretend that I didn't hear what I was hearing. Then, late in 1992, I visited a friend who was going through quite an emotionally challenging time as I talked to her. I felt as if someone or something was trying to take over the conversation from within me, and this presence got stronger, and I began to feel very spacey and drowsy. I finally said to her that I felt that someone or something wanted to communicate something to her, and I felt as if I was losing my consciousness. Would she mind me stepping back for a moment? As the feeling grew stronger, my friend's golden retriever started whining, then barking, getting very anxious. I finally, excuse me, I finally seemed to pass out, but was aware that someone was using my vocal mechanism, and I could feel my hands and arms gesturing. I didn't understand what was being said, but that feeling continued for some time. I finally felt the presence leave, and I returned to consciousness, albeit drowsy. I looked at my friend whose jaw had dropped to somewhere near the middle of her chest. I felt as if I had awakened from a deep sleep. I asked her what happened, and she said little on the subject, but explained that it was all very personal. She seemed very moved and mystified. I did not pressure her any further. I left feeling extremely uncomfortable and, I have to admit, a little scared. I wasn't sure how this phenomenon would be received by other people should it happen again, and I determined at that time that I would keep it all to myself. Years later, my friend told me that the spirit had discussed a child she had given up when she was very young. Some time later, I got a job coordinating the out auction fundraiser in Los Angeles. It was an immerse, I'm sorry, it was an immense undertaking, and after it was over, for some reason, I ended up with 3 sessions with a chiropractor by the name of Eric Pearl. I had never been to a chiropractor prior to that and wasn't even sure exactly what a chiropractor did, but it was California, and I thought it was part of the experience that was Los Angeles. I entered the office on Melrose Place and sat in a comfortable, cozy lobby. I was ushered into a small room where I waited with great trepidation. Then Dr. Pearl entered, and my first thought was this man didn't look anything like a doctor. But I lay down on his table, and before I knew it, this drowsy sensation started coming over me, and I fought to stay awake. I thought I couldn't afford to fall asleep on my first visit. It would be poor form. Although the adjustment, oh, all through the adjustment, I continued my battle against falling asleep and wondered how I would get through the next 2 visits. And sure enough, on the next visit, the very same thing started happening, only the battle to stay awake was harder fought. I didn't know how to reference this and wasn't sure if I should even mention these sensations to the good doctor. Before the next session, I did alert Dr. Pearl to this phenomenon and asked him if it was symptomatic of the chiropractic sessions or process. He looked at me slightly bemused, but fascinated. He suggested I not fight the feeling, but instead surrender to it. I did, and this book is what has resulted from my continuing sessions with him. Do I understand what happens? No, I don't. I only know that I lose a consciousness of a sort, and when I awake, I sometimes remember a word, a bit of a phrase here and there, but nothing more than that. I have shared Solomon, a name we bestowed upon the voice, to many other people who have happened into my environment who are lost or are needing guidance. But in Eric's case, Solomon had a clear mission for him, and his guidance had led to the sessions that appear in this book and ultimately the reconnective healing that Dr. Pearl has pioneered. I believe Solomon's message to be universal, but you will be the final judge on that. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. What a crazy story. The guy, just some old farm guy, grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, went to college, moved to New York, and then out to LA, having these crazy psychic experiences in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, any of that time. Nothing was out then. Jane Roberts was out, but everyone called her a Satanist, or she was channeling evil spirits and things like that. But if you read the Seth materials and use your discernment, you can clearly see that there's nothing malevolent about it. There's nothing bad about it. It's all based in love. It's on how to come more into your own mastery, which all the channel message with any merit of good, that's what it's going to be about. Getting into your mastery, how to further your own conscious evolution. But it's a fascinating story that these two people who seemingly wouldn't meet under any other circumstances, Hollywood or Los Angeles chiropractor who has a very successful business, and this guy who was just trying to make his way through LA back in those days and trying to become an actor, like so many people, ventured out there to, comes across Dr. Pearl at the very beginning. Like, that's how this all started, was with those two meeting. Now, is that a coincidence? No way. Absolutely not. I don't believe in coincidences anyway, so I don't think anything is a coincidence, and I don't believe in accidents. Everything happens for a reason. You're guided through life. You have experiences. You are introduced to people at the exact right time in your life, whether you can see it or not. And now, as the longer I'm on this journey, the more I can look back and see how everything has had a purpose to align me with where I'm supposed to be, or where I'm at now, rather. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to be able to see that, even as a blessing. So there are no accidents. Nothing happens by accidents. There are no coincidences. So evaluate your life, and next time you see a coincidence, just remember there are no coincidences that happen for a reason. So figure out the reason, or at least contemplate it a little bit. Anyway, so this guy needs a adjustment. In another book, Fred, I think, had like some kind of limp or something was wrong with his leg or hip or something. He goes in and gets the adjustment. And in the other book of Dr. Eric Pearl, or the Reconnection, Heal Others, Heal Yourself, he gives a rendition of his experience of Fred coming into the office and walking up the stairs and so on and so forth. And it's interesting. It's interesting. And Dr. Pearl, being the person that he is, was, in shock and awe, but also fascinated and encompassed with wonderment. He just was fascinated and scared at the same time, which I would imagine I would probably be if that situation happened to me. you know I mean, could you imagine that someone just started channeling, you're just in front of you randomly? It'd be a little freaky if you've never experienced that before, especially if you've never even heard of it. Dr. Pearl probably never even heard of it up until that point, until that experience. So that's something very interesting to consider. But yeah, this is the introduction to the book. These are the characters, these are the people who co-authored this book, and they're prologues, they're brief experiences that led their paths to cross in such an elegant way to forever change the planet for the better. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next episode of Solomon Speaks, read and review. I love you guys so much. If you're still here, subscribe to the channel. It's on this side or this side. And then here are some other videos that you guys might like. or one of these over here somewhere, right there. Also, check out the links below. Go to the Patreon site. Consider becoming a member. That helps me continue to be able to put out this free content. I love you guys so much. Be the change that you want to see in this world, and love yourself. All right, bye-bye.